Good evening, everybody. Welcome again to the Borderline Podcast with me, your host, Andrew Willox. Guys, it's the start of a brilliant week. It's actually the Monday Blues, Monday the 15th of January. It's supposed to be the loneliest, most depressive Monday of the year. So if you made it this far, guys, I guess you're doing quite well. So it's time for a solo cast this week, and one of the topics that I really wanted to get into last year that I never made it round to was gambling. And gambling when you have a mental health condition or whether you don't have a mental health condition. It's a pretty interesting subject for both sides. And it's one that has plagued and taunted me for the majority of my life. I'm gambling free for the last couple of years, thankfully. But I would say for the majority of my life, that has probably been my biggest addiction and downfall out of anything. Gambling has always been the one that has came back to haunt me. And so what I want to do today is just speak a little bit about my history with gambling, how it really got quite bad, what I actually miss about it, because there are aspects of gambling that I do miss, and just kind of any kind of worries or whatnot that I can alleviate from you. Maybe you're gambling a little bit too much, you might be able to relate about this, because gambling is a massive problem, especially in the United Kingdom. Again, it's embedded into our culture. A lot of the football teams are sponsored by various gambling companies. A lot of their stadiums even are named after gambling companies. Darts as well. I believe they've just changed the World Championship to the Paddy Power World Championship. So there you go. There's a significance pool in the gambling industry already. Is that they're able to lower their name and their dangers by aligning themselves with entertainment that we enjoy. And let's not forget that, putting on accumulators on Saturday and that tends to be things that people enjoy as well. So on this episode, if you're away putting on your little accumulators of that during the week, I'm pretty sure this won't apply to you. This is more, the serious. You can't really get past, 24 hours to 48 hours without thinking of gambling. You're into the timeouts, you're into the deposit limits, you're wondering why nothing's working and why you won't stop gambling. The reason is because you're addicted to gambling. That is the top and bottom of it. If you cannot put your phone down or put your device away and think, no, I'm not doing it, and you get that pull back, that's addiction and it needs addressed. So there's our first hurdle. So if you're one of these people, it's time to be honest with yourself and time to action, because while you might maintain that you're in control, you're absolutely not in control of an addiction. Okay, that's the most important thing that I want to try and get across, is that any addiction, when it gets a hold of you, it's not just shrugging it off. It takes a great deal of mental strength and fortitude to get out the other side without being an addict. So that's what I really want to focus on this episode. So gambling, just for a little bit of context, gambling for me is something that I've always loved. That's the most honest way of saying it. I used to love gambling. And even from an incredibly young age, 12, 13, I remember spending my tip money off my first job from churches down in the arcade, my Sunday paper round. You go down to the arcade. If you jacked a couple of machines, $5 jackpot, that was all yours. Whatever I was going to buy back in them days, that's what we'd have paid for. And obviously at a young age, you never actually think about a gambling addiction. It's just a little bit of fun. Although I was warned off at that point. I do remember my mother, the wise old owl, my secretary, so to speak, I should say of late, warning me off gambling then. Looking back now, and even the honesty from my mum, she recognised that my dad had a very addictive personality. And I'm exactly the same as that. I need to be incredibly careful how much I get into something, and because anybody that knows me, as soon as I get an idea, I'm like 120% into it. Look at the message this we are the universe that I've trying to sort out, is that I've got too far ahead of myself. So when I get excited by something, or if I start enjoying something, I get incredibly addicted to it very easily. So, obviously, as I say, from a young age, down at the arcade and that, I was quite exposed to the start of gambling, like I suppose anybody else is at their younger years. I suppose the difference there, that if you can walk away from gambling and you're quite happy with that, people could at that age. I couldn't. It was one of them that if I thought the jack was going to jackpot, it'd be lend a quid up for someday. And, you'd get the jackpot on that, you'd pay them back, and it was all about beating the machine, beating the puggy. I guess that's what we all do at the end of the day with those sort of things. So early teen years, a little bit of gambling and that in there. But it really, I guess it really started getting not bad. Like I say, I was kind of in control of my gambling, so to speak, when I went into college and university. Basically, I'd stopped gambling for a couple of years. Didn't really think of it or anything like that. Like I say, it was kind of one of them transitional periods in your life where you kind of gambled, didn't really think about it again. And then I joined college and uni, and I learned how to play poker. And I loved poker. I fell in love with poker straight away. What I found about poker is that I was incredibly good at it. I'm just being incredibly honest when I say that. When I say things that I miss about gambling now, poker is one of them. I really enjoyed the math side behind poker, the probabilities, working out your fold equity, wherever you should have been in a pot, all your odds in that. I was always quite confident at a poker table that no matter what cards that would be dealt, that I'd walk out with a profit. I suppose anybody that understands poker at a kind of higher level will probably understand that it's all about your position, where the dealer is, where the big and small blinds are, who's the aggressive player at your table. So when I was at university at Edinburgh, I'm going to be honest with you, most of the way that I actually made my living then, because Edinburgh is a very expensive city, was by playing cash poker cash poker tables at the casinos. Basically, you go down there, later on a weekend night, and wait for the regulars. A lot of Chinese people like to play the poker down there that weren't very good at it. You'd wait for them to have a couple of drinks. You'd go sit down with maybe £100 in cash, and up to £200 within an hour was the norm. Was the absolute norm. It was almost a guaranteed way of making money, and because of that, it became routine. And because I was enjoying it, a routine that I was enjoying became very, very, very addictive. And from there, I started kind of looking into, I think from there is probably when I really started betting on football accumulators and football and whatnot. But even then, it wasn't out of control. It was your usual, you go into the William Hill, you pick out your ACCAs, maybe a 4 or 5 team ACCA that was maybe return a small amount, and then your wonder bet that you try and win a couple of grand on that never comes in. Some of them at the weekends, and yeah, everything was kind of in control. And what actually happened my very first year at uni, which really should have scared me off everything, was I actually got my entire bank accounts cleared for a fraud case through William Hill at the time. Basically got all my money sucked out my account right at the start of my university degree, got all the money back luckily, but stupidly went straight back to gambling on the same website. So yeah, that's your warning sign of addiction as well, is when there's a very obvious danger, a hazard, so to speak, in your way, but it doesn't matter. That all that matters is that gambling. So warning sign there, number 2, I suppose, definitely. And I just kind of got a little bit worse, I guess, as my confidence kind of went up. Basically what I turned to there was I'd actually started playing online poker. So after my university classes, I'd go back and I'd open up a couple of tables, multi-table at a time, just buy in. And like I say, I was a very strategic poker player. I'm not somebody that would go and play with any 2 cards. Very strict, just to talk about poker a little bit, any starting pair, but really I'd be talking ace queen, ace jack suited would kind of be the lowest kind of hand that I'm going to go into any hand with, because I'm going in to make money. I want to be absolutely sure that I'm going to win that pot. Suited connectors as well, like little hands like that you could maybe bluff on, semi bluff, so to speak. So yeah, and then I actually started reading a lot about poker. What's he called? Is it Doyle Brunson? I think that's what he's called. Doyle Brunson Super System books, Phil Hellmuth, Daniel Negreanu's, all them. I'd read all their books, and honestly, at that point, I probably had the aspiration to become a poker player. The missing part of that is that I didn't have the money to do it. I certainly didn't have the money to gamble to be a poker player, put it that way. And so I guess what happened was I was making all this money. I was making a little bit of money off of poker, and the excess was probably kind of going into the gambling on the football and that just, it kind of stayed constant for the best part of like a year or two, even after I moved back home with my mum after uni and that. My gambling kind of calmed right down. I didn't really, I didn't actively think of it. It was something that I missed, and I remember playing poker at night when I used to get back in from a back shift. There was always the same tournament that I won once actually, that used to start at around about 11:05 every night. So I'd actually pre-enter that before I'd start work, pay for my buy-in, and the tournament would have started for the time that I'd gotten in. But like I say, it didn't matter to me. because I'm a strategic poker player, that I was always kind of confident that I would make stuff back anyway. I'd be able to outplay people. So yeah, I was a little bit arrogant with the poker side, but rightfully so as well. I think anybody that's played poker with me could probably agree that I'm a pretty good player. So things has kind of calmed down, and yeah, kind of normal Saturday accumulators was the kind of norm for a couple of years. Nothing really got out of control, and then I don't really know what happened to really set off the gambling quite bad. But I would say, let me think on this dates. Yeah, I would say it'd probably be around about, maybe around about 2012. So the year before me and Sass had actually gotten together, that I'd say my gambling got progressively worse. And for the start of mine and Sass's relationship, I was gambling, but again, it wasn't out of control. It wasn't OTT. It was the Saturdays and that bit that was starting to change, and I was starting to bet on Champions League football and midweek football. And I'd never done that before, and that was always a little bit new to me. Warning sign number 3 is you're doing it more often. If you start gambling more often, you're getting more addicted to gambling. This is quite easy to work out. So I'd start gambling a little bit more, and I would say progressively for the next 2 or 3 years, I was certainly getting worse with the gambling. And it was getting to the stage that I was probably, I don't really know. I think it's, I suppose you start chasing your losses is the best way to explain it. Is that because I was doing it more frequently, the bookies don't lose. That's the thing. It's odds. The odds are not in your favor. And statistics don't lie. Again, it's quite easy to work out that if you continue to bet more and more, you're going to lose more and more. You're not actually going to win more and more. You're going to lose more and more. So that was basically what was happening with me with gambling. So I suppose you can try and chase your losses a little bit. And I think that's probably when I started getting into a little bit of financial difficulty for the very first time. Was that I was gambling, and I always used to, on my accumulators, £5 or £10 was the absolute maximum that I'd ever put on a single accumulator or bet. And I then started changing my betting patterns to singles and doubles, a lot of in-play betting at higher stakes, £20 to maybe return, it might have only returned 70 or 80 quid, but that was your money back to back. And I changed my gambling strategies so much that I was actually betting 4 or 5 times the amount that I'd ever usually bet, but it didn't feel any different because I was doing it in smaller bets, if that makes sense. So, but the stupid thing that I was focusing on my wins and not my losses again. So although I was winning money back, I was spending more overall in a week, if that makes sense. So I just typically financial numbers, let's just say I'd probably have went from this stage from spending around about £25 a week on gambling to probably around about £75 a week on gambling. Now, some weeks you have good weeks and you don't need to spend that £75 or £25 on gambling because you've won it and that's good. But you forget about them days so fucking easily. And then it's back to depositing. Or the pesky little gambling sites have that beautiful cancel withdrawal button. So you win your money, you decide that, yep, that's fine, I want to take my money out, but for the next 48 hours, I can still cancel that if I need to go back and gamble. Warning number 4, if you're cancelling withdrawals, this is a major sign that you have an addiction. This is now the fact that you've won money. You've now won your goal, you've set out what you wanted to do, and that's still not enough. So, big time. If you're now cancelling withdrawals, it's time to maybe calm down. So that's something that was happening very, very, very frequently with me. You know how it is. You get a win, you maybe win 150 quid. I'll take the 100 quid back out and I'll leave 50 quid in there to bet with. You take your £100 out, it's still floating into cyberspace. You spent your 50 quid. There's some games on a Sunday afternoon or Sunday night. You think, I can have a little bet on that. Cancel with the withdrawal. Do it to £50 in, to £50 out, and then the next £50 gets cancelled, and then all of a sudden you've spent the money that you wanted to withdraw originally. That's how it works. And it's a vicious circle, and I'm sure people listening to this, there is loads of you that can relate to that sort of way of working when it comes to gambling, and it's certainly the most devastating because you can't actually win. When you're winning money and you're trying to take money out and you're still being allowed to put that money straight back in, you're not going to win. So yeah, massive warning signs there. And that was happening a lot more frequently. And it was actually getting to the stage, so just on a timeline, I think I'm going to say this is around about 2016, 2017, that, yeah, it was getting progressively worse. And what was happening was those stakes were actually increasing. So I'd like, because my analytical side of my brain was coming over from, and probably from the way that I play poker and looking at statistics, is that I wanted the odds in my favor. Now, to do that, you need low odds, which means not a big, not a big, not a big winning, not a big cash out, unless you want to stake more. So from there, you're going from, your £5, £10 bets are no longer occurring whatsoever. They've then been replaced by £15, £20, single, doubles or triples that might only land £100. But the problem with they're far more frequent because they were in-play bets or, bets for games that were coming up straight away. The return had to be quite instant to then stake again more. So, the stupid little challenges that you used to get on Facebook and that, £10 to £200 and 15 bets, and that was the kind of style that I was going for. And to be fair, it was actually working. I was actually returning money again, because I was using the odds in my favour, because I was kind of playing the system the way to kind of even it out. But for anybody, that's not a very exciting way to gamble. When you're staking £20 to return £50, it's not getting your blood pumping that much. Which you get to the stage with gambling, you need that, and that's the problem. This is the massive warning sign. This is the biggest one, that when you get excited and what you're doing isn't quite cutting it in terms of gambling, then you've got a serious problem. Now it's time to look for help. Is that you've ignored all these warning signs leading up to it, and now, despite the fact that you're doing it, it still isn't enough to get that kick out of that buzz off of it. And the only thing that really calms down that kick is to win, and to win significant, because as you stake more and more, everybody knows how much they're down in the back of their head, roughly. If you've been betting all day, you've probably got an indication that I'm 50 quid down, I'm £100 down, I'm £200 down, I'm £500 down. So you know what you kind of have to stake or to win back to get you back to even. And like I said before, gambling is pretty much just chasing losses. 9 times out of 10 it is. So yeah, really, really, really important that those signs aren't ignored, which is exactly what I did. Funnily enough, which is why I'm sat here speaking about it. So yeah, and I'd say around about that time, that's when, debt first started really kind of appearing in terms of gambling. So your credit card debt, which is actually really good now. I'm not too sure. This was changing just as I'd stopped gambling, but I don't think you're allowed to use MasterCards on betting companies now. I might be wrong, but it'd be good if somebody could verify that for me, or I could verify it for myself after this episode. Which is obviously, you shouldn't be. Another warning sign when you're using credit cards, that's money that you don't even have to gamble. That is serious. So that's kind of what the stage that I was at then. But I was in a relationship then, and things were different, and I had different responsibilities. And I think it's very lucky that I was in that stage of my life as well, because that was enough at that point to think, fuck, Ken, you've got a bit of a problem here. It really was like, it was kind of getting to the stage that if I was betting on a Friday night, betting on a Saturday night, betting on a Sunday night, maybe Monday and Tuesday nights off, but if there's midweek football, certainly Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, Champions League, Europa League, straight back in there. And again, a lot of in-plays, a couple of accumulators, and I'd probably say there, for despite the fact that I am winning some back from what I'd mentioned earlier, up to like £75 a week, we're now up to probably around about £150 a week. So, kind of doubling up all the time. But at that point, I couldn't afford it, and it was obvious that I couldn't afford it because I was getting myself into debt. So basically what had happened, I think it was probably around about 2018, I'd actually went into it's GamStop, it's called. You sign up for GamStop, and that was that. And I honestly thought that was the chapter of my life of gambling closed forever. And I thought, wow, actually really good, because this is something that it kind of plagued me from like I knew kind of gambling was having quite a serious effect on me, all throughout my day, because I was thinking about it quite actively, thinking about fixtures that were coming up that I could possibly win off, and dodgy fixtures that I would avoid, looking at form and stuff. It was taking up a lot of my time, researching how I could win. And again, that's just feeding your addiction. So I'd signed up to GamStop. Now, GamStop's a company that you can put in your... I hope they're a little bit more tighter in the security and systems now, because I'll explain all this to you very honestly as well. So GamStop works that you put obviously in your email, your postcode, your name, your number, and whatnot, and that then self-excludes you from any betting company under the UK regulations just now, I believe. So basically, you can't gamble on any registered site. Now, what I mean by that is that, your Bet365s, your Paddy Powers, your Betfred, Sky Bet, they're all registered, regulated gambling associations. You can still go onto, and this isn't I'm not trying to sell this for anybody that needs a gamble. There are other ways that you can gamble when you're on GamStop. However, these are incredibly dangerous. Not a lot of security on their sites. The contracts and regulations of payouts are nuts. So if you are at the stage of going and using one of these sites, you really do need help, because you're not, even when you're winning back, it probably isn't the sums of amount of what you're actually seeing. Take off the transaction charges and whatnot that they'll add on. You can't actually win on these websites. That's what I'm trying to say, is they will absolutely ruin you and rinse you for every single penny, especially these Bitcoin gambling websites. Stay well clear. They're so dangerous. And so I'd been excluded from everything, and it felt really good. Honestly, obviously, it takes a couple of weeks to adjust. You give up smoking, you give up drinking, anything that you kind of you're doing daily or every day. It takes a while. It was on my mind a lot. Every time I'd watch football, I was like, Ken could have bet on that. I would have bet on this. I would have done this. And it was quite tough, but it passed. And so basically what happened, I'd signed up for GamStop for 2 years, I think it was, which I think was the maximum that they were offering at the time. So 2 years go by and no gambling, and I feel absolutely fine. Well, maybe the odd gamble if I was, actually physically into a betting shop, which was very, very, very rare. There's obviously a couple in Berwick, but it's been years since there's been one in Imhoff. So I mean like if I was on a day away at Edinburgh, again, stick a £5 accumulator, nothing dangerous, nothing that was going to trigger me into then going into the casino and spending my life savings. And so it was absolutely fine, and I still remember the day clear as fucking day. Excuse my French. I was working. This was a Friday afternoon, and I remember I was sat at work at lunchtime, getting my pieces and whatnot, and I was actually in my car, and I happened to notice an email came through from GamStop, and it was then, this is 2 years on, and it was notifying me that my 2 years period had ended, and it was advised to restart my period by clicking the link, answering the questions again, and I would have remained self-excluded. However, stupidly, I decided not to. And that, to this day, is probably one of the worst decisions I have ever made in my entire life. And now I'm going to explain why that was. So, effectively, because I didn't click on that link, I knew that I could then go and sign up or re-sign up all my accounts, and that were then active again on all the betting companies across the UK. So, I tricked myself slightly with this too. So what I did was I didn't use GamStop. I actually went to the betting companies and I self-excluded from a couple of them, which means I could only use certain, a couple of betting sites in the UK, because that to me was kind of controlling it. It's absolutely not controlling it, because it still allowed me to go and do it. This is how addictions work. You need to be so strong with yourself to really, fickle down and think, what stops me from doing this? Because that's what you need. You need to stop. You don't need to trickle down. If you're addicted to something, you need to just stop doing it, okay? It's same with people that quit smoking. I'm cutting down. It doesn't work. You're still feeding the addiction, okay? It might work in very rare cases, but the majority of the time, our brains aren't strong enough to continue through with that. So, yeah, really bad, stupid error on my part was not following that link. And basically what happened from then, I would say it's probably that Friday night, I was back gambling again. And the same, and the thing with gambling is once you go back, I guess in the physical sense of drink, I guess it's kind of like that. Once you go back to it and you have a taste of it, you want more of it, and you just keep on going. And it was like that. It was like 2 years of suppressing this addiction, just all of a sudden just like erupted out of me. And what happened more dangerously then? So I straight back into gambling, straight back into the normal strategies that I was doing. So, Friday, Saturday, Sundays, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. Well, there you go. The only date that I probably wouldn't be gambling is a Monday, and even that I would have found something to bet on a Monday. You can guarantee it. So yeah, I was really bad, and from going well back into like what I was saying was £25 a week was easily at this stage £25 to £50 per day. And like I say, this wasn't like straight money coming out my wallet. Well, it was. It just didn't look like it at the time because I was winning some back, and you're like, oh, it's actually not too bad. You're breaking even. You're actually making a little bit of profit and whatnot. But again, reliant on credit cards to fuel that addiction isn't great, and especially if you have a mental health condition. Now, this is where I want to be a little bit serious on the mental health drive. Kind of why I'm doing this episode is if you're like me, you will want to find something that gives you that dopamine hit, that gives you that buzz. Because in my life, I don't really have, I don't get that by myself because of obviously what I struggle with. I need to synthesize my dopamine, if that makes sense. So, and that can happen for a number of different ways. That can happen from playing music. It doesn't have to be something negative from what we see negative, but gambling is almost the highest dopaminergic driving force that you can get in your brain, because it's financial, because when you get it, it's instant gratification, it's instant satisfaction, it's instant win, it's belief that you can win at something. And that is really so dangerous if you suffer especially from the likes of depression, bipolar, anxiety, DID, ADHD. You really want to stay clear of gambling as much as you can, because of that feeling that it'll give you. It'll feel so much better for you that you'll want that over and over and over again. And I don't want to blame my gambling on my mental health. But when I look back now, it makes a lot more sense in the fact that what I was chasing a feeling. For me, the financial drive was obviously there because that's why you gamble. But it was the feeling of winning, that drive, that nerves at the 90 minutes that your team can't concede or you're going to lose that 600 quid that you could have cashed out. That feeling, them nerves, that's what I was addicted to. That's what I was trying to get at. Because it made me feel more alive. And there are so many dangers hidden between gambling and mental health and suicides. And there is a huge ongoing relation between all three, especially in the UK, like I said earlier, because we have such high, because gambling, kind of like alcohol's really embedded into our culture. We have ridiculously high suicide numbers for the country that we live in. And we don't have the really best economic or welfare standards, and you stick all them for free, and you end up with lives lost at the end of the year because we don't control these. There's no controls in place, and how do you get around that? I mean, it's not like you can vet everybody that signs up for a gambling website wherever they do have a mental health condition. So it really is just in the responsibility of yourself that if you believe or if you know that that there is something wrong with you, I would really, really try and stay clear of gambling, because when that starts going wrong, you are just going to get so much worse, and you're going to get so much more stress in your life. So going on, like I said, I'd probably up to at least £25 a day, sort of things like that, and I was winning. And what had happened then, the massive danger of what I then walked into was slot machines, online slots. So I'd never touched slots because I knew the dangers of slots. And because, like I've mentioned earlier, when I used to gamble, it was always strategic. How do I win money? I knew slots are not the way to make money. Slots are not, right, I've got to say this as well. Slots are stupid. I can say this now because I don't do it. If you play slots, you're pretty stupid. The odds are there in front of you. It's like I'm something stupid, like 71% is the return factor. So you're playing on a 29% chance that you're going to win a profit of anything you stake. Of that, it's obviously going to be proportionate to your stake. So, and yes, you get the lucky odd few that's put 20p in and they get 50 grand or whatnot. But how often do you hear that? Once a year? And how many times do people gamble every day? Put into context, it's nearly impossible. It's probably not going to happen to you. In fact, you've probably got more of a chance if you put on, instead of spending that tenner that you do on the slots, if you literally put on 4 different lottery tickets, combine the odds, I'm pretty sure your odds will be lower on the lottery than what they would be from staking 20 pence over multiple spins to win a jackpot. That's that's how low your chances are. But you don't grasp that with addiction. So I'd went into slots, and I don't even know how this came about. For some reason, I never bet low on slots. It was always, minimum 50p to a pound a spin, like stupid. So the return prizes were high. There's been times that I've taken a couple of £1,000 in a day, but I've spent that couple of £1,000 straight back, and that is what was happening towards the end of my relationship with gambling, was that I was on a good day. Let's just be honest with numbers. I would say I got to change this to a weekend. On a good weekend, I would probably in total have staked somewhere between £1,000 and £2,000. On a good weekend, that would return me probably around about £2,500. On a bad weekend, that probably returned me around about £1,500. So you can see the difference there is probably around about £1,000, which is massive on a weekend, to where my gambling was up and down. And that amount of money on the probabilities is not good. Statistically, you're going to lose more, and that's exactly what was happening to me. But the evidence, and anybody that gambles will relate to this, the evidence was there that I had to stop with gambling, but it was the last thing that I wanted to do, because gambling was also my way out of it, because I'd started to amass a little bit of debt and whatnot. I kind of figured in my head that a couple of big wins, clear your debt, stop gambling. And there was an opportunity to do that. Now, I'm not going to go into detail and exact numbers because you'll call me an absolute idiot. But there would be a point, definitely around about, this is probably during COVID, so around about 2021, that I could have cleared every single penny of my debt that I had from gambling at that time. But thanks to the cancel withdrawal function, my weak-minded brain, and a little bit of mental health conditions, I'm still in that little bit of debt because I went back and spent the money. But what really worried happened then. So, if you can cast your mind back to GamStop, let's say I'd went back and had self-excluded from a couple of websites, but I'd left myself open to a couple of websites. Now, GamStop's really good and GamStop's really secure, but what I'd end up, I don't know how I managed to do this, but I ended up self-excluding myself from everything without using GamStop. So I couldn't, I don't know how I'd done it. So I couldn't gamble on anything. And obviously at the time being an addict, that was very troubling. That was a very big issue for me at the time. And so basically my way to get around that was to test the waters with GamStop. And by that I meant simply changing a letter in my surname that wouldn't flag up on the GamStop database when I went to register on an account. Now, I'm saying this in honesty, and that's what I've done. I'm pretty sure they will have a security system in place to get past that. Now, let's say it's a couple of years on. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be the only one that's done that. So it was fine. I was able to sign up to every betting account that I could again, simply by changing the L in Willox to a C, and that annoying mispronunciation that I always get of Andrew Willox. So I was going about as Andrew Willox online, which is massive fraud. I've got to be careful what I say here. And yeah, so really got to be careful what I say here now that I've just said that. Fuck's sake. I'm just being honest. So I changed my name, so that's a little bit of, I didn't actually legally change my name. I changed my name on the gambling website, so I was able to sign up. But then the issue came to paying the money out. Now, then the names would obviously have to lie under Andrew Willox, which would be flagged up as somebody that couldn't gamble, somebody on GamStop. That's what I'm trying to say. And so to get around that, you had to do security checks of just basically showing, your bank cards, driver license and whatnot. So I very quite niftily on Photoshops and whatnot, Photoshopped my driver license, changed it around, sent it away. Keep in mind, if I get caught at this point, every single thing that I've earned, a couple of £1,000 is sat there waiting to withdraw. That's getting taken away from me. I'm probably going to get a court proceeding or a criminal charge in my name for fraud. So there's a hell of a lot going on. It's like I'm gambling. I'm staking a lot on trying to get this. And I ended up winning. Well, I ended up clearing. I don't know how it did. And I got all the money. And I paid off a lot of debt. I did everything that I was going to do. And then, in my head, I was like, right, cool. You've done this. You've actually used this to an advantage now. Could you do something more with it? And I should have stopped gambling then, but I just got worse and worse and worse. And it was getting to the stage of the slots that if I was to go 8 hours without gambling, I was doing incredibly well. It was all the time. How Sass didn't know, how nobody knew how bad I was, because I was incredibly good at hiding it, or at least at the time I thought I was good at hiding it. So I'd run away to the toilets, pretend I had the shits, go for baths, stuff like that. Anything so I could kind of be away gambling, so it wasn't obvious how much I was gambling. Obviously, I was doing it on my phone all the time. And, this went on for months. And eventually I just got exhausted. I got completely exhausted. I was running into more debt that I could keep up with at the time. And eventually I just gave up. And I knew that if I didn't tell Sass and my family what was going on and how bad I was actually getting involved in gambling, I was going to get caught. And I kind of weighed up the options that if I get caught doing this, it's going to be a shitload worse than if you just come clean and you're just honest and you admit your mistakes and you try your hardest to get on past this, which is exactly what I'd done. I basically woke up one day, and that was pretty much it. It was weird. I'd woken up and I was just totally defeated. I was shaking. I'd realised that I spent, thousands and thousands of pounds on it. I think, what's the word? What's the phrase that I'm looking for? The penny had dropped with me, so to speak, that I knew what kind of mess I was in, and I knew that I had to change. Like I say, I was gambling. I said 8 hours. I would say probably it's 4 hours, really. At any opportunity during my day, if it was a quick go on the slots, if it's a quick football acca. I was never really into the horses at all. Then I'd go and do it. It's important to note as well, at this point, I had not played poker in over, 8 years. So the one thing that I was really good at, the one thing that I could actually kind of be financially dependent on in gambling, was the one thing that I had actually zero interest in doing, because I was into that feeling, that buzz. And poker would never give that buzz, because I was so calculated with it, so to speak. So I came clean, and, as with everything, you fear the worst. I was fearing divorce. I was fearing that. It never happens. Never happens quite as bad as you put it in your mind. But it was still a pretty awful time. It still is a pretty awful time. Still carrying a little bit of debt forward from my gambling. And, it's by having conversations like these that you understand, how stupid I was at the time. And it probably, for the best part of me, took me a couple of months to really, really, think that I was clear, psychologically, addictively clear of gambling. And to this day, I honestly can't remember the exact date that I stopped gambling. It would have been somewhere in 2022. I've not gambled since. I've not gambled a single penny since, apart from the odd Borders competitions. I am going to win 20 grand on that one day. I don't mind that because I can't mind his name now. Damn, it's Jack. I think his name's Jack. Does so much for charity. Absolutely amazing individual. I hope to get him on the show at some point actually too. And so stuff like that I can kind of gamble. I don't do the lottery anyway. Irish lottery I used to do a lot too. Funny story about the Irish lottery is the Saturday that I gave up gambling, my fucking numbers came up. As they always do. Always do. So yeah, like I said, I'm not going to get into numbers and talk about exactly how much I've spent on gambling, but it's multiple £1,000s, and multiple £1,000s that are in gambling agencies' pockets and on my pockets. And that adds stress to your life. And like I've said, the major point and the main point of why I wanted to kind of do this solo cast, this little episode, is just to highlight how relatable gambling issues are, gambling addictions are, especially if you struggle a little bit with a mental health condition. And that is, I cannot echo that enough during this episode, that if you struggle at all mentally, please be responsible enough to pull yourself away from gambling. Something that gives you that false dopamine hit isn't going to be good for you long term. You need to find something else that's going to deliver that to you, like meditation. It can be anything else, as long as it's not doing financial harm, mental harm, or physical harm to you or anybody else. Then you're not hurting anybody. You're not hurting anything. But gambling is something that's going to hurt you, and it's going to hurt other people, and it's such a systemic problem. I mean, you see all the people, like, I cannot stand it on Twitter when you see the people, look how much I've won. You're showing what you've won, you absolute freaking idiot. Like, we all know how much, well, in fact, we don't know how much you're losing. It must be astronomical, because I can guarantee you are not winning all them without losing significantly more. It's so stupid. Yeah, please listen to what I say there, and please avoid gambling at all costs. So that's pretty much all I've got to say on this episode today. Like I say, I'm just trying to do a weekly little solo cast with some, a little bit of the ideas that I'd left from last year, bring them across to this year, and to talk about topics that we can all relate to in our everyday lives. And there'll be a lot more of this coming up. And if you'd like me to cover any other topic, or you have any ideas in relation to anything else that you'd like me to say, please fire me a message on my Instagram at Andrew's Anxiety Adventure on Instagram. We will be forming up the Patreon account very soon, like I spoke about on the episode on Saturday with Jasmine. But until I'm at a pace that I've got a lot of content out there that I believe warrants the subscription fee, I won't be sharing the URL or address for that with anybody. And I guess that's it. So, the worst Monday of the year, a little bit of gambling, and hopefully something that you can all relate to, and we can all have a discussion about at a future date. And until then, guys, I've been Andrew Willox, and this has been the Borderline Podcast. Good night.